There comes a moment in life when exhaustion becomes louder than fear. A moment when you realize you've been gripping people, outcomes, timelines, and versions of yourself that were never capable of holding you back. You think you're protecting yourself by holding on. But what if that grip is the very thing keeping you stuck? We all have that turning point, the night you cry until you can't speak. The morning you wake up feeling empty instead of anxious. The moment you recognize that the life you're fighting so desperately to control is quietly slipping through your fingers. You didn't lose your way, you lost your rhythm. And the more tightly you held on, the more life tried to pull away. But something changes when you finally let your hands fall open. Not in defeat, but in surrender. Not because you're weak, but because you're done carrying what was never meant to stay. And in that stillness, life turns towards you. The people who once ran begin to slow down. Opportunities that felt far suddenly feel close. Peace, the kind you begged for, finally sits beside you without you chasing it. This isn't a story of loss. This is the quiet, powerful story of what happens when you stop holding life hostage and let life hold you instead. This is the story of release, rebirth, and the moment everything finally returns. There's a strange heaviness we learn to live with long before we ever learn how to name it. It becomes so familiar that we stop questioning it. The pressure to hold everything together. The constant tightening in your chest that whispers, "Don't lose this. Don't let this slip away." You grip conversations tightly, afraid to be misunderstood. You grip relationships tightly, afraid to be replaced. You grip your future tightly, afraid that if you let go for even a moment, everything will collapse. Most people never realize they're not holding life. They're strangling it. We aren't born this way. Children don't cling. They move. They trust. They fall, cry, get up, and try again. But somewhere along the way, someone made us believe that being relaxed meant being careless, that trusting meant being naive. That surrender was the same as weakness. So we tighten. We overcorrect. We grip the world with white-knuckled fear, believing it's the only way to stay safe. The truth? Holding on is never about strength. It's about fear disguised as responsibility. Think about how much of your life has been shaped not by desire, but by fear of losing control. How many messages you reread to find hidden meanings. How many hours you spent refreshing someone's online status. How many nights you laid awake, imagining scenarios that never existed, rehearsing conversations that would never happen. And every time you tightened your grip, the world seemed to pull further away. Life has its own rhythm, but we spend years trying to drag it to our beat. You tell yourself, if I stop trying, I'll be forgotten. If I stop fighting, I'll fall behind. If I let go, everything will fall apart. But here's what we never realize. Everything is already falling apart because we're gripping what was never meant to be held. That relationship that drains you, you're holding it together while the other person has already emotionally checked out. That job that suffocates you, you're holding on to it not because it fulfills you, but because you're afraid of starting over. That identity, you cling to the strong one, the patient one, the forgiving one, the uncomplaining one. You hold it so tightly that you forget you're allowed to outgrow it. Clinging doesn't keep things close. Clinging suffocates them. And somewhere inside you, you know this. That's why you're tired. Not physically, spiritually. Your soul is tired of holding what's breaking you. Your intuition is tired of warning you. Your heart is tired of pretending that your grip is strength. Letting go isn't the scary part. What's scary is realizing how long you've lived without trusting yourself or life to carry you. But here's the first truth in this journey. You cannot receive with clenched fists. The more tightly you hold on, the more life has to pull back just to breathe. And maybe, without realizing it, the thing you've been praying for, love, peace, clarity, direction, has been trying to reach you, but your hands were too full to welcome it. The story of change never begins with courage. It begins with exhaustion. And this is where your shift begins. Not when you finally let go, but when you realize you've been carrying what was never meant to stay. We all think we need it. We all believe it's what keeps life predictable, manageable, safe. But the truth is, control is the most seductive illusion we cling to, and the hardest one to put down. You don't chase control because you're demanding. You chase it because somewhere in your childhood, somewhere in your heartbreaks, somewhere in your losses, life taught you that unpredictability is dangerous. Maybe someone you loved walked out without warning. Maybe a moment changed your life in ways you weren't ready for. Maybe chaos arrived before you had the tools to understand it. So you made a silent promise to yourself. I will never let anything blindside me again. And from that day on, you didn't just live. You monitored. You analyzed. You anticipated. You rehearsed. You watched people's tone, their pauses, their silences. You tried to outthink hurt before it arrived. That's where control begins, not as a desire for power, but as a desperate attempt to avoid pain. But here's the irony. The more you try to control life, the more out of control you feel. The more you try to predict people, the more unpredictable they become. The more you try to force outcomes, the more resistance you meet. Because control isn't connection. Control is fear, wearing confidence as a mask. And fear never creates stability. It creates tension. You can feel it in your body. The tight shoulders, the shallow breath, the constant alertness, like you're always waiting for something to go wrong. The mind that never shuts off. The heart that never feels fully safe. But here's the truth, no one tells you. Life was never meant to be gripped. People were never meant to be controlled. Love was never meant to be monitored. Future was never meant to be forced. Control keeps you busy, but it keeps you empty. It pushes away ease, softness, flow, alignment, because these things can only exist where trust exists. And you cannot trust the world when you don't trust yourself. Letting go of control isn't detachment. It's acceptance. Acceptance that you cannot make people love you. Acceptance that you cannot force opportunities. Acceptance that timing has its own intelligence. Acceptance that the unknown is not your enemy. Because here's the secret. Life is not resisting you. Life is trying to move you, but it can't because you're holding onto the ground you've outgrown. Letting go of control is not giving up. It's giving permission for life to become bigger than your fears. And that's when alignment begins. There is a moment, subtle, quiet, and easily ignored, when holding on stops being an act of hope and becomes an act of self-betrayal. A moment when your mind whispers, just a little more effort, but your body already knows the truth. Your heart feels heavier. Your intuition grows louder. Your spirit feels drained in a way sleep cannot fix. Yet you stay. You hold on. Not because it's working, but because you're afraid to face what happens if you stop. This is the part no one wants to talk about. Sometimes we aren't holding on to love, or loyalty, or dreams. Sometimes we're holding on to memories of how things once were, versions of people who no longer exist. Sometimes we are holding on to the fantasy of what we hope things can become, not what they actually are. We cling because the familiar pain feels safer than the unfamiliar, unknown. You tell yourself, it's not that bad. Maybe I'm overthinking. They'll change. I just need to be more patient. I can fix this if I try harder. But deep down, you know you're not holding on to a connection. You're holding on to hope that keeps breaking you. Self-betrayal often wears a gentle disguise. It looks like patience. It sounds like kindness. It feels like responsibility. But underneath it all is fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of making a mistake. Fear of relearning life without the things or people you've wrapped your identity around. Letting go demands a level of honesty most people avoid. Not honesty with others, honesty with yourself. You must admit that something is no longer aligned. You must admit that the effort is one-sided. You must admit that your peace is shrinking. You must admit that you've been ignoring your intuition because the truth feels too heavy. But the truth is never what destroys you. It's ignoring it that does. You've probably felt that internal shift the moment a relationship, a job, a friendship, or a dream stops feeling like support and starts feeling like tension. The moment conversations require more effort than connection. The moment your laughter becomes quieter, your excitement becomes forced, your energy becomes fragile. But because you're a loyal person, because you're a giver, because you were raised to push through discomfort, you stay long after the universe has already pushed you to leave. And slowly, the cost rises. You start abandoning your needs. You start silencing your thoughts. You start shrinking your personality to avoid conflict. You start molding yourself into someone who doesn't even feel like you anymore. This is the true danger of holding on too tightly. Not that you lose the other person, but that you lose yourself. Letting go isn't about them. It's about returning to yourself. It's about ending the story where you play the healer, the fixer, the pleaser, the one who carries everything alone. You deserve relationships that don't require you to dim. You deserve dreams that don't drain your soul. You deserve peace that doesn't require performance. Your life does not expand through force. It expands through truth. And the most powerful truth is this: you're not letting go to lose something. You're letting go because you finally realized you've already lost too much of yourself holding on. And the moment you choose yourself with the same intensity you once chose, everything else your entire life begins to shift. Letting go doesn't actually begin when you walk away from something. It begins when you release the outcome you are gripping in your mind. The truth is, you can leave a person but still cling to the hope they'll return. You can leave a job but still cling to the identity it gave you. You can let go of a dream but still cling to the shame of not achieving it. Releasing the outcome means something deeper. It means releasing the version of your life you built inside your head. The hardest thing to accept is this: you weren't just attached to the person or the situation. You were attached to the story you imagined. You imagined how it would end. You imagined how they would change. You imagined the future you would share. You imagined who you would become with them. You imagined what achieving that goal would prove to the world. And when life didn't follow the script you wrote, you panicked. Because what you were really holding on to wasn't them, it was the future you painted. But when you release the outcome, something shifts inside you. The fear softens. The pressure dissolves. Your breath deepens. Your body loosens. Your mind stops spiraling. You stop needing life to match your expectations. You let life be what it is and trust that it's enough. This is what people misunderstand about surrender. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop relying on a specific ending to feel okay. Surrender isn't passivity. Surrender is cooperation with reality. It's saying, I don't know how this will turn out, but I trust myself to handle it. And something magical happens when you reach this state. The universe stops feeling like something you must fight. You begin to understand that what is meant for you cannot be missed, and what isn't meant for you cannot be forced. You begin to notice opportunities you were too stressed to see. You begin to meet people who feel like alignment, not effort. You begin to feel drawn toward places you once felt pushed toward. Your intuition grows louder. Your fear grows keener. Life stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like a dance. The moment you release the outcome is the moment you remember your own power. Not the power to control everything, but the power to remain centered regardless of what happens. You stop trying to predict life. You start participating in it. You stop trying to force speed. You start trusting timing. You stop judging your worth by your results. You start valuing your peace above all else. And in this state of acceptance, life finally has room to deliver something better than the ending you imagined. Most people think letting go feels like loss, and in the beginning, it does. It feels like an empty room after someone leaves. It feels like an unanswered message. It feels like waking up and remembering that the thing you prayed for isn't yours anymore. It feels like grief, not just of what you lost, but of who you were when you still believed it was possible. But eventually, something unexpected happens. After the silence, after the sadness, after the bewilderment of starting over, after the heaviness finally settles, something inside you, something small, something soft, starts to wake up again. Rebirth is not loud. Rebirth is quiet. It begins with tiny moments of clarity that don't make sense at first. You look in the mirror and don't feel ashamed. You laugh at something simple and feel the laugh come from your chest instead of your mask. You wake up one morning and realize your heart doesn't hurt in the same place anymore. You start choosing yourself in small ways, drinking water before coffee, saying no without guilt, resting without apology. Your body starts trusting you again. You begin to see yourself not as someone who lost, but as someone who learned. You start understanding that walking away wasn't failure, it was salvation. The you who tolerated disrespect is gone. The you who begged for attention is gone. The you who tried to earn love by shrinking is gone. The you who believed chaos was normal is gone. This part of the journey is sacred. It's the quiet reorganization of your inner world. You begin to feel like you, again, but a version of you that is softer, wiser, calmer, more grounded. You don't rush anymore. You don't argue with reality anymore. You don't chase people anymore. You don't perform for acceptance anymore. You start noticing peace in places you never bothered to look, in slow mornings, in long showers, in unhurried conversations, in silence that no longer feels threatening. The more you heal, the less you cling. The more you grow, the less you fear. The more aligned you become, the more life begins to meet you with ease. This is the rebirth that holding on was preventing all along. Because you weren't just gripping a person or an outcome, you were gripping an outdated version of yourself. And when you finally let go, your soul finally had space to breathe. Letting go feels terrifying, until one day, without warning, it feels liberating. At first, you think the quiet is emptiness, but soon you realize it's space for clarity, space for alignment, space for things that are actually meant for you. And that's when it happens. Life begins to hold you, not in dramatic, instant miracles, but in subtle, undeniable shifts. The right people find you without effort. Right conversations flow without rehearsing. Right opportunities feel natural instead of forced. Your intuition becomes sharper. Your boundaries become firmer. Your heart becomes softer, not because you're vulnerable, but because you're safe. You start attracting what once felt impossible, not because life changed, but because you changed. Your energy is no longer desperate. Your presence is no longer tense. Your expectations are no longer suffocating. You stop clinging to timelines because you finally learned that nothing meant for you needs to be rushed. You stop doubting yourself because you've survived every ending you were terrified of. You stop fearing the unknown because the unknown has become the place where miracles begin. Life doesn't reward control. Life rewards alignment. And alignment begins the moment you choose peace over pressure. You become magnetic, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because your energy is calm, centered, unbothered, whole. People sense it. Life senses it. The universe senses it. You realize that what you were begging for was never missing. You were just blocking it with fear, confusion, and trying too hard. And now, for the first time, you feel held. Not by circumstances, not by outcomes, not by people, but by life itself. Because when you stop holding on out of fear, life finally has room to hold you back out of grace. There is a strange, quiet magic that begins to unfold the moment you shift from gripping life to letting life hold you. It doesn't happen in a dramatic explosion, nor in a sudden awakening that shakes your world apart. It happens subtly, so subtly that at first you don't even notice it. It begins with breathing differently, not the shallow, anxious breath of survival, but a deeper, slower breath, the kind that feels like the world is finally breathing with you, not against you. It begins with mornings that feel lighter, even when nothing around you has changed. You wake up and, for the first time in a long time, you don't feel the urge to run towards something or run away from something. You simply exist. And that existence feels enough. Letting go didn't fix everything, but it shifted you. And because you shifted life quietly, shifts with you. People who once drained you begin to fade. Conversations that once triggered you now pass through you like wind slipping between curtains. Situations that once terrified you suddenly look smaller, less threatening, almost laughable. The storm outside hasn't stopped. You simply stop standing in the rain. And when you stop fighting for control, something beautiful happens. Life begins to reveal what it was trying to give you all along. The person who once ignored your worth starts sensing your absence, not because you punished them, but because you reclaimed yourself. The opportunities you chased begin returning in forms you never expected. Softer, calmer, more aligned, more honest. The anxiety that once lived in your chest starts loosening its grip, not because your problems vanished, but because you are no longer trying to solve them from a place of panic. You have entered a different state, a quieter one, a wiser one. For years, you believed strength meant effort, pushing harder, trying more, staying longer, proving yourself louder. But suddenly you discover that strength also lives in stillness, in waiting without fear, in walking away without anger, in trusting that the road you choose is enough, even if you cannot see its end. And this trust, it's contagious. The universe responds differently to people who trust. Opportunities become clearer. Intuition becomes louder. Synchronicities appear, those strange, perfect timing moments that feel like life whispering, "See, you're not alone." And maybe the most healing moment of all is this. You realize that the things meant for you never left. They were simply waiting for you to stop chasing. Love that is meant for you doesn't run when you rest. Peace that is yours doesn't disappear when you loosen your grip. Opportunities written for you don't require force. When life holds you back, it doesn't feel like resistance. It feels like being carried. It feels like sitting inside a soft, invisible current that slowly aligns you with the right people, places, choices, and versions of yourself. You begin to understand that every time life blocked you, it wasn't rejection, it was redirection. Every no was protecting you. Every delay was preparing you. Every ending was cleansing your path for something that could not coexist with what you were clinging to. Your pain wasn't punishment. It was an invitation. And letting go wasn't loss. It was permission. Permission for life to finally rise to meet you, instead of you constantly bending yourself to meet life. This is the moment you realize life was never against you. It was simply waiting for you to stop gripping the wrong doors so your hands could open to the right ones. And here, in this space between surrender and becoming, you finally understand what peace actually feels like. Not the absence of chaos, but the absence of fear. There is a version of you waiting on the other side of letting go, a version who doesn't survive life, but shapes it. A version who doesn't chase, beg, or grip, but stands still and draws life toward them. That version isn't created through effort. They are born the moment you stop being who pain taught you to be. Now, step into that version. Letting go was only the beginning. Rebirth, that's the real transformation. And it doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly, like dawn sliding slowly into a dark room. At first, the rebirth feels strange, foreign, almost uncomfortable, because for so long, your identity was tied to carrying things. Your worth was tied to endurance. Your safety was tied to knowing, planning, controlling. Now there is space. Space where anxiety used to live. Space where fear once whispered. Space where others' expectations once dictated your choices. And in that silence, you might feel lost because you have never lived without the noise. But slowly, a new voice begins to rise inside you, softer, calmer, steadier. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it urges, it guides. It nudges you toward the life you were always meant to meet. This is your intuition, the voice you abandoned when fear became louder than truth. Rebirth isn't a new version of you. It is the original version of you resurfacing, the one buried under years of pleasing, performing, clinging, and fearing. You start noticing things differently. You start craving different environments. You start choosing different people, not because you're better than before, but because you finally understand your value. The things that once excited you now feel shallow. The people you once tolerated now feel heavy. The dreams you once chased now seem too small for the person you're becoming. You begin to desire depth, peace, consistency, presence, authenticity. You discover that the world doesn't need a louder you. It needs a truer you. This rebirth isn't loud, it's intentional. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth. You no longer chase people who fail to meet you halfway. You no longer negotiate with your own peace. You walk differently now. Not faster, not slower, just more aligned. And because you walk differently, life meets you differently. People speak to you with more respect. Opportunities feel more aligned. Your mind feels less chaotic. Your heart feels less disparate. Your steps feel guided. This is what happens when you shift from force to flow. The universe doesn't reward effort. It rewards alignment. Your rebirth teaches you that everything you once wanted wasn't too far. You were simply too tangled to receive it. And now that you've untangled, life begins to weave itself effortlessly around you. You realize you've stopped fighting for things that come naturally when you're no longer battling yourself. You've stopped trying to impress the world and started impressing your soul. This is the you that life was waiting for, not the exhausted you, not the afraid you, not the gripping, clinging, controlling you, but the surrendered you, the open-handed you, the trusting you. And in this rebirth, you finally understand the truth people spend lifetimes chasing. You were never meant to hold life together. Life was meant to hold you. The moment you let go, the moment you released what was breaking you, the moment you unclenched your fists, that was the moment life found the space to take your hands. And now, without forcing, without fighting, without clinging, you rise. Not because you chased anything, but because you finally opened yourself to everything. Every letting go journey has a final stage. The return to yourself. Not the wounded self, not the fearful self, not the self who needed external validation to feel safe, not the self who shaped their worth around other people, but the self you lost along the way, the self who loved deeply without losing dignity, the self who dreamed boldly without rushing the clock, the self who trusted intuition more than anxiety, the self who felt joy without explaining it, the self who didn't apologize for existing. This return is the true reward of letting go, because when you are no longer shaped by fear, you stop living reactively and start living consciously. Your choices begin aligning with who you truly are. Your relationships become healthier because you no longer tolerate disrespect disguised as love. Your goals become clearer because they are no longer driven by insecurity. Your peace becomes your priority, not your afterthought. You stop surviving. You start living. Letting go was never the end. It was the bridge back to yourself. The version of you that trusts the timing of life. The version of you that doesn't chase, cling, or beg. The version of you that understands that endings are portals. The version of you that recognizes alignment by feeling, not by logic. You'll look back one day and whisper to yourself, that wasn't loss. That was liberation. Because what you thought you needed to hold on to was actually the very thing holding you back from your fullest self. And when you finally stop clinging, not only does life hold you, you hold yourself. If something in this touched you, don't leave quietly. Write even one sentence in the comments. Not for me, but for someone scrolling who needs to know they're not alone in their release, their rebirth, their return. And if you're ready to stop gripping life with fear, if you're ready to let go and finally let yourself breathe, subscribe to Wakeful Wisdom. Because this isn't just a channel. This is a place where your mind unlearns fear, your heart relearns trust, and your soul remembers who it was before it was taught to cling. Your new beginning starts now.